How's it going? It's Ken. The next subject we're going to talk about is high intensity logistics. I said in the introduction that what we trained for when I was in the Marine Corps, we trained for high intensity conflict. Now I'm going to define that for you as quickly as I can for those of you who don't know what a high intensity conflict is. A high intensity conflict is basically a war in which both sides have the same type of equipment. Okay, they all have an assault rifle, some type of assault rifle. And assault rifle means it can fire more than just semi-automatic. Okay, it might be a 3-round burst. It might be full automatic. Okay, and that type of weapon system is called select fire. It is not just a semi-automatic weapon. They have tanks, they have mortars, they have artillery, they have helicopters, they have jets. Okay, and so that is what encompasses a high intensity conflict. In this high intensity conflict, we're talking about hundreds of men, sometimes thousands of men, fighting hundreds or thousands of men. And they're bringing the full weight of their armory to bear on one another. So what we're talking about, high intensity conflict, is a full-blown war. Now, we, as in the United States, have not had or have not been engaged in a high-intensity conflict since Vietnam, in my opinion. Okay? In Vietnam, the Vietnamese had rockets, they had select fire weapons, they had mortars, they had artillery, they even had jets. They didn't necessarily use those jets in South Vietnam, but they did have jets. So we're going to talk about the last few wars, if that's what you want to call them, that we've been involved in. The most recent was the GWAT. Well, in Afghanistan and Iraq, that was mainly, except for there were a few exceptions, but mainly it was an insurgency. It was a guerrilla action. You didn't have hundreds of men fighting each other. They weren't at the same time. They weren't using mortars and artillery. Both sides were not using jets. Okay, the United States was the only side that had a full complement of war machines that they were using. The Afghanis, they didn't have all that stuff, and neither did the Iraqis. It was pretty much an insurgency. The war I was in was the Gulf War, and Saddam Hussein had those weapons. They had jets, they had artillery, they had mortars, rockets, etc. They just didn't use them. I mean, those guys didn't fight. They would surrender en masse. I mean, whole units, like whole battalions, would surrender as soon as the American forces showed up. And it was quite surprising. And it became a problem because all of a sudden you've got these thousands of prisoners of war and no way to control them. Really, the only thing we could do was take their weapons from them and hand them an MRE and 2 bottles of water and say, hey, walk that way. And they would. They didn't cause any problems. So we were expecting a high intensity conflict, and except for maybe a couple of battles where the Republican Guard, the Iraqi Republican Guard, fought it out with American forces. I don't even know if you could actually call it a war. They call it a war, but those guys, they didn't want to fight. They surrendered as soon as they could. Okay? So the one before that was Vietnam. And in Vietnam, 2 things were going on. There was an insurgency that was carried out by the Viet Cong, the VC. But there was also high intensity conflict carried out by the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA. And there were times when the NVA and the VC would mass, they would join into one huge group, and they would attack American and South Vietnamese forces. And we're talking, once again, about hundreds of men fighting hundreds of men. The very first unit I joined, the regular Marine Corps unit, I was finally done with all my training. The very first unit that I joined was overrun in Vietnam 3 times. And they suffered at least 30% casualties each time they were overrun by the NVA. That was, I got there in January of 1982. So the memory of those, the organizational memory, if that's what you'd like to call it, of those events were still kind of fresh. And we talked about it quite often, about how all the weapons, all the ammunition that we had available to us, even in Vietnam, those units were still overrun. It broke into hand-to-hand combat. And the unit suffered at least 30% casualties every time. And that's what I'm talking about when I say high-intensity conflict. Okay? The unit gets attacked. There are several units involved, and several units suffer 30% casualties or more. That's high-intensity conflict. Just wanted to make sure you understood what that is. But what I'm talking about here is not actual combat. It's logistics. So in high-intensity combat, you have to have good logistics. If you run out of food, you're done. If you run out of beans, bullets, Band-Aids, you're done. No food, no ammo, no first aid, you're going to get hurt really bad. Okay? So I'm going to tell you a quick story. Oh, before I say that, before I get into the story, there's one more thing I'd like to say about that. I think preppers, or maybe not, I shouldn't generalize like that. There are a lot of people that I see on YouTube that are enamored with special operations in the GWOT. Okay? But I don't think that's a good idea, because the GWOT was not a high-intensity conflict. If you really want to study some special operators, some special forces type deal, and that is more complementary to what preppers are preparing for, what you should study is MACV-SOG. MACV-SOG. Those were the operators in Vietnam. They did long-range reconnaissance patrols. They had hunter-killer teams, and they would be out in the bush for days and days and days. And they carried everything they had, everything they needed. It was on their back. So if there's someone that I believe that preppers should emulate in the special operations community, is MACV-SOG, because they were getting it done in a high-intensity conflict. There is no doubt that those were some badass dudes. Okay? So, I'm not trying to dog out. I'm not trying to say anything bad about the operators, special operators, SEALs, Special Forces, CAG, CIA. I'm not trying to dog out all those guys in the GWOT. I'm just telling you that they did a fantastic job, right? I'm just telling you that if there's, for a prepper, the people you should try to emulate is MACV-SOG, because what they did was extremely different from what the special operators did in the GWOT. Okay, so now that I got that out of the way, we'll talk about MACV-SOG some more later. When I joined the my first unit, I was in artillery. Okay, so there are several jobs in artillery. In my job, that I quickly found out was not really what I expected at all. It was much more. In my job, in a high intensity conflict in my unit, it was our job to go forward right along with the infantry, sometimes in front of the infantry, and find suitable positions for the artillery to place their guns, firing positions. Okay, we would go in and recon these positions, prepare them for artillery to be used as an artillery firing position. I'm not going to go into any of that at all. I was also trained as a forward observer, a naval gunfire spotter, and that included being an aerial spotter in some type of small aircraft like a helo or a small prop observation platform. So to kind of give you an idea how old I am, the Bronco was still flying around. And the main vehicle that we used was, I believe it was called the Gamma Goat, the M577 Gamma Goat. That's the forerunner of the Humvee, okay? So, but anyway, that's what we would do. And in training, twice a year, we would go out to the field for about 6 weeks. And the first 2 weeks, my section, my unit, would go up first. We were there alone, right? For 2 weeks, sleeping on the ground. And what we were trying to do was replicate the idea that we would be out in the bush without direct support. So everything that we had, we brought with us. Okay, we had a 5-ton truck. We loaded it full of MREs and water jugs. Okay, everything we needed went into our vehicles, and we would take off. And for 2 weeks, we would be unsupported. Okay, so about every, I don't know, I think it was about like every third day, someone would have to take one of the vehicles, head into base, and fill all the water jugs with fresh water. So we would have something to drink. And then we would practice our skills for those 2 weeks. Recon the position. You have to find it, then you have to recon it. Then you go in there and prepare everything so the howitzers can move into that position and fire. After those 2 weeks, then the main body would show up, everybody else in the unit, more or less. Okay, and things got easier. I mean, heck, we even had hot chow. Okay, the field kitchen would come in and set up, and then for about 2 weeks, out of that 6, about 2 weeks is about average, we would have 2 hot meals a day. And then in the 6th week, they would tear down the field kitchen and we would prepare to leave. Okay, that's what we was practicing for, is to do our job in high intensity conflict. So when I'm talking about high intensity logistics, that's what I'm talking about. Everything, whether you're a kid like me in an artillery unit and you're going out to recon positions and you're out there for 2 weeks on your own, or whether you're a super hardcore motivated, high speed, low drag, MACV-SOG operator, everything you got is with you. And that's it. That's it. If you don't have everything you need when you get to where you're going, or you're doing your job, you just don't have it. You do without. Okay? So in the prepper community, whatever you're doing, if you're having to bug out, or you're having to use your get home bag, or you're part of the militia, or whatever, I don't care. You can think of it by yourself. You need to think in terms of high intensity logistics. If you don't have it in your pack, then you're not going to get it. You're not going to have it until you get home. Once you're out there, you're on your own. There's no freaking resupply. There's no medevac. Nobody's coming to save you. Okay? So that's what all of these videos I'm doing is about. Okay? Logistics, logistics, logistics. If you don't have it in your bag, it's just too damn bad. Get over it. Okay, so I'm going to tell you this right now. My Bob, my bug out bag, and my get home bag, it's the same. It's the same bag. And my bag is 50 pounds dry. Or I shouldn't say that, excuse me. My pack is between 50 and 60 pounds wet. That means I have food and I have water. Okay, I can go, the longest walk that for work that I would have to take is 200 miles. Now, what are my chances, even including all my experiences and knowledge, what are my chances of actually walking 200 miles with a bag that's 30 pounds wet? And I'm going to tell you, it's freaking zero. Zero. Now, if you've only got to walk for 2 days, then yeah, you can get away with a pack that's 30 pounds wet. Yeah, you can get away with that. Matter of fact, I can get away with less. I know guys who can get away with less easily because we have the training and we have the experience. But most people in the prepper community do not have that training, nor do they have that experience. Now we're going to back it up for a moment and say, okay, what if I have my wife with me? I'm not going to be able to make it on a bag that's 30 pounds wet for 3 or 4 days. Now her pack is about 30 pounds wet because, you know, she's a petite woman and I don't particularly care to punish her by making her carry more than 30 pounds because humping is freaking horrible. It's painful, right? And I don't want to put any more weight on her than is necessary. So I carry the majority of the weight. Now, let's even go a little bit further. What if you have young children with you and you have to walk for 60 miles? Okay, you can do 60 miles, or you should be able to do 60 miles. All right, it is, you know, quite easy actually to do 60 miles in 3-4 days. It's easy, right? But what if you have your wife and then let's add in a child or maybe 2 children? Do you really think you're going to walk 60 miles in 3 days? And all you have with you is one pack, 30 pounds wet. Not happening. Hate to hurt your feelings. You're not going to make it. So that's one of the subjects we're going to talk about, not right now, okay? That's one of the subjects we're going to talk about is those situations. The main thing right now, the focus for all these videos is high intensity logistics. Do you have in your pack what you need? And can you stay healthy and fed for 25% longer than you expect to be walking? So so we're going to talk about that. But this is the little brain teaser. This is where I'm going with these videos, all right? So hope you get some great stuff out of it. If you do, pass it along. Once again, if you want to know who I am, this is the video to watch. So I hope you have a blessed day.